Welcome to Planning and Beyond, the podcast where financial planning meets human understanding. I'm your host, Ashley Kwame, and today, repeat guest, VIP guest, partner in crime, Dr. Megan Lertz is joining me here today. Meg, hello, friend. How are you?
I'm well.
This is small talk, technically, just the how are you. I just want to make a note that technically, right, is asking how are you. You get one. All right. For those of you who do not know, Meg and I sit on opposite sides around whether small talk is useful, beneficial, needed, or good. So we sit on opposite sides of that. That's for another day, another podcast. So this is going to be a little bit of maybe a different type of episode than before. Typically, when guests come on, I interview them, we bring insights, knowledge, wisdom, nuggets, all of the things. And not that this is not going to have insights and wisdom, but a little bit just of a different purpose for maybe today. And so instead of interviewing Meg and having her share everything, all of her brilliance and wisdom, today we're actually going to be talking a little bit about Beyond the Plan and just the direction that it's heading as a business, as an approach. Some things that Meg and I have been working on collaboratively behind the scenes that we're pretty friggin' pumped about. Yeah, super excited. If you can't hear it in our voices, we are.
We're just really trying to do our best not to laugh. So we are being super serious.
We're being super. This is our very serious voice right now, so that we don't bust out into laughter and get way off track. But we're going to share a little bit about what we are calling the 5 core domains of Beyond the Plan. And so this is something that Meg and I have talked about for the last several months, just in terms of a approach to how we want to think about financial planning, how we want to think about supporting advisors, how we want to think about even client support and firm support. And so we thought that with the new year upon us, that this might be just a really great time, natural time for us to jump on and share a little bit about kind of behind the scenes what's been going on for us. So Meg, just kind of with that, let's high level, would you add anything kind of to that around these 5 domains before we name them? Because there's some anticipation, they're in general, even philosophy or approach that you might add about these domains that we're going to get into here.
I think the only thing I want to add is that it's kind of come from a topic that we have been talking around, but could not necessarily name until somewhat recently. And it's this idea of experiences, that financial planning is an opportunity to provide experiences. And so we get calls and questions and stuff like that from advisors all the time. They're like, yeah, that's cool that you say that I should talk about values, or I get it that there should probably be, something that I do when these couples walk in the door. But what is that? How do I make that a thing? And so
Mhm.
we have really tried to think about how to make that a thing. And
Yeah.
to help advisors, support advisors in developing, deploying experiences around
Yeah.
financial planning.
I really love that. I love that statement that you just said, that financial planning is an opportunity to give or create experience, right? And so, in this kind of what I'm hearing from a buzzwordy standpoint, like the experience economy, things like that, some of it is reframing a little bit of what is financial planning. And I think exactly what you just said, that it is an opportunity to create experiences for clients. And so, naturally, what does that look like? And lucky for you, Meg and I have all the answers.
So yeah,
Maybe. Or a few. We have a few.
we got a place to start.
We have a place to start. We have a few ideas. We have a few things. So in one of this is where really just kind of these 5 core domains kind of came out of, is that if we scale back and look at really what is financial planning, what is it getting at? There are 5 core themes, domains that really emerged for us. So Should we name all 5 and then dive into them? What do you wanna do? We didn't think this out. Should we just, like,
I say we name all 5,
let's
and
name all
then
5?
we circle back and, go deeper.
Circle back and go deeper. All right, cool. So, for those of you listening, the 5 core domains are 1, security and freedom; 2, connection and relationship; 3, growth and discovery; 4, health and vitality; and lastly, number 5, impact and legacy. So we have security and freedom, connection and relationship, growth and discovery, health and vitality, impact and legacy. And so a lot to just kind of throw at you there for a second. I think maybe what's most natural, Meg, maybe we just start at the top and just kind of work our way down. So in thinking about like security and freedom, maybe let's put a little bit of definition to this for everyone. Like what are we talking about when we say like security and freedom?
Well, one of the things that you and I have even talked about, this one is so interesting because it's the yin and the yang, and we always think, that we got to strike a balance. Like somewhere, somehow, there is this pendulum or there's like this scale. And if I could get it just right, I would have this perfect magical balance of both security and freedom in my life. But it doesn't really quite work like that. And I think through every season, there might be different securities and freedoms, that need to be reviewed. You and I have talked about, you probably even know better than I do, that sometimes you walk in and there's a couple and one's the security member and the other one is the freedom member. And
Yeah, we know who
that can
that is. I know who
be
you're talking
kind
about.
of
Yeah.
crazy. And so it's just that and this one can show up, in so many ways, whether it's how you spend your time, time autonomy. It can show up related to decision independence. Do you feel that you can spend on the things that you want to when you want to do it? There's career flexibility and financial security being a big one. But these are all different manifestations, all different conversations that bring back this idea that it's one of those things that has to constantly be traversed, constantly reviewed. And this is not a bad thing. In fact, I think sometimes it can be freeing, to think that there is no perfect thing and that you're not failing if you're not hitting that. But, how do you articulate that? How do you talk to clients about that? What are the different conversations that you could have? Could you break these different things apart? Is there a tool, that you could help put them, in front of the client and say, let's think through this? Because these are really important, like some of the biggest things that people say when you ask them things like, what do you value? Security and freedom are at the top of
Top.
everybody's list.
At the top, for sure. And ultimately, like I think about too, like at a very basic level, this is also what advisors are really like striving for with clients is that balance for giving their clients security and freedom. Like, advisors may not say it directly in that way, but like when you funnel things down, like what are you trying to give your clients? Security and freedom is probably pretty darn close to being that answer there. But in terms of what does it look like? There's a lot of different maybe like sub kind of topics there. Some of them that you've mentioned. I think it is always very interesting, shockingly, within a couples system when there are just, opposing or complementary. I prefer complementary. It just sounds nicer and fluffier. Complementary approaches to,
Yeah, a true couples therapist.
yes, like
That's
a
a
true couples.
complimentary
It
idea.
is complementary. It is not
Ooh, an idea. Would you like
opposing.
some tea? Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna hold our pinkies. We're gonna hold our pinkies, yes, while we're doing that. It is always very interesting and tricky
Mm,
for advisors when it is different within the couple or even larger, like the family
mm,
system, like
mhm.
maybe even between generations here. When to bring it back to, high level, like with Beyond the Plan, like this is such an important domain that is one advisors and firms, should be looking at. How are we talking about this? As you said, what tools and resources are we giving our clients? How do we know how to navigate these conversations or the, uh, you know, red flags, if you will, for
Mhm.
maybe when this is a problem, like this domain is like on fire. It needs some attention because there's maybe differences between two partners. One wants to spend a whole lot more, the other wants to save, and yet they both value security, and free. Like they name that as a top value, but getting there looks different.
Mhm.
So, I love this as like this to me was, I don't know, this to me was one of like the more easier, like obvious ones that I think shows up for advisors. What else do you feel like might be helpful in talking about just kind of this domain in particular?
I think that we were kind of touching on it, but even though it is really common and it seems like something that we always discuss, and again, you can get clients usually to name these, but the nuance of it, the new, like when you say security, what are you envisioning?
Mhm.
What does that look like? When you say freedom, what does that look like? I feel like when we were talking about this before, it always kind of reminds me of that Tupac song. I mean, people have probably their own opinions about that, but there's the Tupac song where he talks about, being able to pay his own rent or, and like help his mom. I think that has, that is also, that is about security and freedom. There are also visions of people that think, oh, they need to have, $10 million in the bank and a yacht, that somehow that would be security and freedom. But getting people to articulate that, I think is its own skill set. And
Yeah.
then like what to do with it. Once they've told you that, how do we wrap that back around to actually putting it into the plan somewhere, so that it continually gets, and as we mentioned, these are likely to change. These may always be important, but how much pull or push security or freedom has over your life at any given moment is going to look different. And so how can we not only have this conversation, but build it in that we are going to continue to have this conversation and update it. And that there probably is no, we're not actually reaching for a golden mean. We are reaching for adaptation and support. Then what does that mean at every step?
I think that just last piece there that you're talking about in terms of what does it look like, while also knowing that really I think about this if I think about it like a document, and clients are rating themselves on a Likert scale, like, self-report, where do they fall maybe in each of these domains? Like thinking about this as a living, breathing that's going to change over time. I think that is such a great point for all of these domains, right? And where
Yes.
we are now with security and freedom, I've got preteens here in a very short time. Security and freedom is going to look a lot different, in 10 years for Clayton and I than it does right now. That will be different. It will change. We will be spending more money. I can tell you that for sure. So, knowing just that and revisiting the conversation, revisiting the theme and everything that comes into it, even updating the definition, if you will, is important. So, okay, let's go on to number two. That second domain of the five core domains is connection and relationships. And so I think about this as, the bonds, the relationships that really give life a whole lot of meaning. That can be pretty broad there. Tell me, for you in talking about this, what do you want everyone to know about this domain starting out?
I think this is always a really hard one to talk about because it seems like
Really?
yeah, because I
Ooh.
think it seems like it would be weird to ask clients about their relationships.
Okay, I see where you're going because I'm silly me. I'm thinking about this from a therapist lens, and this is the easiest one. Okay, I'm tracking.
But yet we all know that like in retirement, one of the hardest things about the transition to retirement is that, well, if you're not at work, yeah, you thought you would have these work friends, but then your work friends have to go to work and they really don't care that you get to sit by the lake all day. And so you lose touch. And this is so important. It's like at a brain level, there is so much importance to keeping up relationships, having positive relationships in your life, and being able to talk to clients about that, in some way, shape, or form becomes so important.
Mhm.
But again, it's one of those things where I feel like a lot of people in our industry say that, like, oh yeah, you should definitely talk to clients about their relationships. but, exactly how you do that, where you bring that up, what might be the various ways, that that could come into play. I think that that's where it gets a little bit weirder or maybe like not quite as clear. And so that's like we want to help shed more light on that, like how to do that better.
I think if we, kind of take that elevator down a bit more, on what relationships, certainly there's the obvious ones like a coupleship, they're asking about, their relationships with their children, if they have any, or their parents, kind of the up and down generations there, even their family, like extended family, like your siblings. And some of why this is important is because there are things like caretaking might come into play. And so understanding that. I think that every advisor should do a basic family tree, like a genogram, like a basic just to understand who are the members from like a name standpoint, and even having those discussions, and I know that they do, like, will you be expected to take care of your parents, like, as they're aging or stuff like that? But are there other members too? And so having that, knowing those relationships is helpful. But there's also other ones, that may not seem as obvious here. And some of those include friendships, like social relationships, social support systems, professional relationships. And this could be even for advisors themselves. It may not be of your clients. Some of this might be applicable for you, but also community involvement. Like,
Mhm.
how are you involved? Like, because those can be very meaningful bonds, right? Being engaged and out in the community as well.
Yeah. I think, yeah, again, this is one of the most important ones when it comes to positive psychology and even just general mental and physical health. But it can be a one that outside of like, well, what charity do you want to support? And that's important. We should do that. Yay, charities. But like there's many, many ways to probably talk about relationships, talk about how to get more out of your relationships, talk about spending money in the name of your relationships. And, this is going to be a common theme that Ashley and I probably talk about a lot in 2026 that absolutely matters to the things that we're talking about right now. But like, what if you had a meeting that was called like, well, you could call it relationships or you could call it, we're going to have a community involvement meeting. We're going to talk about relationships and how important those are. As you're going through this transition, I want to spend some time on that. And so whether it's, a little bit of scripting around that, whether it's, I'm really big on naming stuff only because it helps people who have no concept of like what you're talking about, aka your clients, not because they're dumb, but because they've never had a financial planner before. And, now you're saying to them, oh yeah, we should also talk about, your community involvement beyond just, I don't know, donating to the museum. And people might be like, well, what does that even really mean? Like, what are you talking about? And so having then the tools, the process, another big thing that comes up here is boundaries and,
Mm.
expectations
Ooh.
of not only the financial planner's role as it matters to all of these relationships, but also what are the boundaries and expectations of the other relationships. I mean, that's one of the most interesting things. Like when you're the son and you become the caretaker, that's hard. When you are
Family business. You've got
yeah, family business
son.
stuff
Yeah.
everywhere. That that it makes that whole thing hard. You're the financial advisor who's this person's friend, but now you also have to put on your financial advisor's hat. Sometimes that can be really hard. And just what you're comfortable with as a financial advisor. There are some financial advisors out there that are like, okay, yeah, couples disagreeing doesn't bother me. I think I can facilitate, a discussion and keep the relationship, at the center and not necessarily take sides with either client. There are others of you that probably think that sounds horrible. And so, it's okay whichever one you are, but like let's have a plan to talk to the client then about not I don't want to, be involved in your fighting, but like how are you going to articulate those expectations so that they know how to work with you as much as you know how to work with them? And what's going to happen, when we get into some of these, we'll say high emotion situations.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
All
makes sense.
over there.
All right, number 3, growth and discovery. Growth and discovery. So when I think about this, when we've talked about it, like we've talked about things like personal development, educational pursuits, certainly like experiences that may include travel, but it might also again kind of include creative expression, or furthering any kind of intellectual curiosity that maybe is not tied to educational pursuits or career advancements there, but even spiritual growth as well. So looking at from a where are we allocating money helping clients kind of within this domain, there's a lot from the growth and discovery place that we can be doing to help and support clients. Share with me, Meg, what comes to mind for you? What's most interesting about some of these? Because we were talking this morning about actually some of these as well.
Yeah. This for me is really about that piece of like helping somebody to live an engaged life.
Mm,
And
I like that word.
yeah, thank you. Giving them permission, to try new things, encouraging them to experiment, with
Yeah.
different ideas. And that, not only like if we think about positive psychology and the E, stands for engagement,
Mhm.
this is something that matters to overall well-being. And it's ultimately something that's tied to money. Like if you're going to be spending on these experiences or taking these classes or whatever thing you want to develop or work on, sometimes it takes, I think, the support from the financial advisor that's like, hey, like what do you want to focus on or think about or gain a new perspective on over the next 12 months. Let's plan a couple of experiments, or if they're working towards something that's further away, like a larger growth milestone. Well, what are the things that we should be focusing on in the next year related to that? We may not cross the threshold or whatever, cross the finish line, but we can be pursuing things and doing things, related to that. And this one is maybe more fun than anything else. But to full back or like all the way back around to the beginning of this, where the fact that I can't stand small talk. If you
Did not think you were going there when you
I'm
said circle back. Okay, let's go. All right. Yeah.
imagine being, if you've had a monitoring meeting where you're like, hey, yep, things are good, weather's good, yep, got a golf game coming up soon. Look at that, the portfolio is doing okay. All right, see you again in 6 months. I'm not saying that this is bad. Back to my belief that small talk isn't bad, but it doesn't move anything forward. And so if you instead were to say, hey, we're going to have a growth and discovery meeting. I'm going to ask you, about different life domains. I'm going to get you to think about, the different places that you might aim for in terms of growth in this next year. So sure, we'll check in on the portfolio, make sure that we're all, square on that. That's what we're going to talk about. That does move your relationship forward. That does move the conversation in some sort of a direction and gets people more and more comfortable with the idea of experimenting. And this is like naming it and doing it. That is what moves financial planning from being a service to an experience. We're going to play a game. We're going to try this thing. We're going to go through these cards. We're going to talk about this deal. We're going to try this tool, whatever. And you're going to get people to think in a different way. And you're going to be facilitating and taking them through that. That is an experience, which I think is a whole other level of service than how we currently treat it.
Yeah, absolutely. What comes up for me with this one and has come up a lot more recently, is sabbaticals.
Mm,
More and more, professionals wanting to do and or take sabbaticals. This is part of that growth and discovery like domain. How do we do that? What does that look like? There is obviously a financial planning element to that. But client that really wants to go and write this book, but I kind of need the time to be able to do that. Or I just want to take a year off and really just be with my kids, like before they start, primary school. Like I just would like to go live in a cool country and take this time off and go be with them. There's a lot of growth, right? Obviously in discovery, like that can come of that, a lot of richness, a lot of experience from that. So I hear that comes up. I think that can be incredibly valuable for your clients. And I think financial planners sit at the center of being able to support clients, not just from a numbers standpoint, but conversationally helping to explore and maybe even distill the meaning and what would that mean and how beneficial it would be to them to be able to have that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly that. That like what would we say? What would this mean? How do I distill this down? Like that is all part of the experience of this. That we're not just, shooting fish in a barrel and calling it a goal. We're being very thoughtful and we're taking them through these exercises or these thought experiments, to try to we're being very mindful about what that means beyond just I'm not saying you can't just ask a question about, hey, like, is there a hobby, you really want to think more about this year? That is a great place to start. But if the client is maybe having an off day or something like that, or they're like, well, I guess you've never really asked me that before. Like, I don't know. In many ways, it kind of ends the conversation. Whereas if, again, we go back to this idea of treating it as an experience, we're going to have this meeting. Here are some of the things I want to ask you. Here are the different domains that I want to think through. Let's get serious, about this, that those pieces I don't feel, I mean, we haven't given them, and I don't know very many people in the industry that are giving them, where it's like, again, we talk about these things as like good ideas, but I don't just want good ideas. I want good action.
Yeah, I love that. All right, number 4, health and vitality.
Yeah.
I think this one for me comes up, there's a lot of ways, right? I think when I think about health and vitality, first that comes to mind is, physical health, like mental health. I think that's kind of the obvious one. And certainly planners need to have, there's some impact there, around that. But even things like stress management, um, that is important to know about, important to have conversations about, and even just how can money support you doing that. We've had some younger couples, and where this kind of comes up is being able to allocate money for like gym memberships in very small ways, or even from like a wellness standpoint, bringing in a chef to do some prepped meals, there. But what are some ways that maybe money can help support kind of this health vitality domain? How do we talk about it? You work with a lot of students. Like, does this come up like in your conversations? Is there, I guess to me, what I wonder is this might be one of those where you said connection relationship is like awkward, but I have actually think this one might be the hardest one to kind of talk about, just because it may not exactly connect in an obvious overt way to financial planning. But do you have students that say that, or what's
Yeah,
your?
I have had a student say to me verbatim, younger white male. So I think he was probably in his like late 20s, early 30s. And he said, look, Dr. Lertz, I know that like asking about health and about not just like lifespan, as people say now, but health span, Peter Attia style, and that, those things are important. But tell me how I'm supposed to sit across from a female client who's 65 and ask her like about her bone density or menopause or like how I get that I'm supposed to ask things about her health, but that seems a little above my pay grade. And I'm like, yes. So I it is weird to ask about health. But it's also weird, like equally as weird or equally as hard, I think, because when we start to talk about health and we start to talk about energy and we start to talk about physical needs or even adaptive changes, you're making somebody talk about their body and like
Mhm.
how it may or may not work as well. And, all financial planners would tell you that if you have cancer in your family that you know about, if you have dementia in your family that you know about, then yes, it does increase the chances that you're going to have it. And it may not be very fun to talk about it, but to not talk about it, that is a reckless financial plan. So
Right.
like advisors, we need to have language around, how to ask about what we want to do when we're feeling really great and what we want to do when we're not feeling so great and, everything in between. But asking health questions can be kind of tough just because it's emotionally intense for people. Also, just thinking about that dynamic of like, if you're a male and your client's a female, or vice versa, or you're very young and they are more mature, like then, there are some things like that that like we do need to think about or be aware of. This doesn't mean that it's a deal breaker. It doesn't mean don't do it. It just means we need to think, about how we want to bring this up, because it is absolutely a part of the financial plan. And for a good financial plan to be in place, we need to think about both good and bad health outcomes. So how do we bring that to the table, and encourage people not only to take care of themselves now, but also in the future, and just sort of what those different things look like. So yeah, I agree. This can also be a quite difficult conversation to have. And people, in my experience, advisors have a lot of questions about how to do this well.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of different ways to talk about health and vitality. And, certainly a lot of the work that we do and will be doing over, the next year is just offering some guidelines, tools for, conversation starters. Here's how to do this. Here are maybe some areas to start with that might be, comfortable. The last thing I guess that I'll say about this is shockingly specific to the mental health, domain. And what I think is important here is not that advisors know how to be therapists. I would never encourage that. We don't want you to be therapists, but there may be some clients where there are some indicators or red flags that having maybe just some like high level knowledge of like knowing, okay, if a client is anxious, right? Like maybe what are some of the just kind of base level like signs of, okay, they're very anxious. And what should I do? What is my role? What is the advisor's role in this? Knowing how to, I'm very big on knowing how to refer to mental health professionals specifically. And I think that every single firm out there should have a list of mental health referrals, people that they refer to and know how to refer to. Even we've been talking a little bit just kind of about physical health, stuff like that, but also on the mental health side of things too. Even like neurodivergence, like ADHD, if you have a client that's ADHD, planning with them is going to be different.
Yes.
It is going to be different. And so you don't have to be an expert on ADHD, or anything like that, but it's important to maybe at least be aware of and to know and to maybe ask questions from an experience standpoint, what is helpful for that client there. All right. So last one, impact and legacy. So for clients, like how do you contribute? Do you contribute to those that you leave behind, and what do you want that to look like? There obviously like some of the things that come to mind are like estate planning and stuff like that, but we're not talking specifically about estate planning. When it comes to that is a piece of it, but there's a whole lot more from an impact and legacy place. Things like certainly like charitable giving, community building, even like passing down like family values and information, that way. What comes to mind for you when we talk about impact and legacy?
I think in this area, that idea of having an experience is probably even more front and center. Again, you could ask a client and even maybe their family members, what do you value? And again, this is a good start. We should definitely do that. But what if, there was a tool that you could lead them through that was a values exercise? And so you said, hey, we're going to have you come in. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to use it, in relation to your financial plan, or when we have these different financial planning meetings, I'm going to bring it up in this way. So you've established that there's a thing that they're going to do, that they're going to learn something about their family. And then we've already established how we're going to use that. I think that is a really cool thing, to be able to take people through. In a similar or related vein, this idea of knowledge sharing, I feel like it's one of your financial planning clients that you've worked with in the past that says not about an inheritance, but a family heritage, something like that.
Yeah.
And so beyond just like the money that we want to pass down, like what is the wisdom? What are the stories? I know, because Ashley and I have talked about it, that both Ashley and I have received a gift from our grandparents, her from her grandfather, me from my grandmother, that I believe our grandparents did totally different things, but they each wound up in one way or another with a book, about their life that was then given as a gift to the family. And it is one of my most cherished gifts ever, I
It's my
believe.
favorite book.
And like to do something like that, there's so many different things that you could do. But to think about that, like what would that mean? Could you bring that up as a part of financial planning? Especially because it could just be a book about their life. But if it's a book about their wealth or about how they want to make financial decisions or the teachings that they want to pass down, so that could be a really cool experience, around wealth and legacy and memorial that other financial planners maybe are not doing. And or again, like, yes, we need to have all the estate documentation in place. I am not saying that that is not important. It is probably of the most important, but it doesn't have to be just that. It can be much more than that. And the opportunity here, as some of these link back to each other, like this connection with your family, this connection possibly to a broader community, this relates back to relationships and how important
Sure.
those are for a full life.
Yeah, absolutely. I love these domains.
Yeah,
I
they're so
love
good. They're
I
so
love
good.
them. They're so great. They're so awesome, man. All right. We could sit here and talk more about them, and we will over the
We
coming
will
year,
over the
just
coming year.
not right now in this episode. But let's talk a little bit about I don't do this a whole lot on this podcast.
I'm nervous.
But do what?
I'm nervous now.
You probably should be. um that is wise. That is valid and wise to feel that way. But let's talk a little bit about what does this maybe look like in terms of how you and I are delivering this, like from an offering standpoint. Because what I don't want, and I think you and I both feel very passionate about this, is that we could sit here and talk like cool ideas all day, but that really isn't helpful for advisors who are like, sounds great. And what do
Mhm,
I do with this? And so, I think that you and I we're excited, equally excited about coming out kind of with this offering to really help support this. So let's talk about this foundations offering that we're rolling out that covers and is aligned with these 5 domains.
mhm. So, it's for firms that are somewhere between 200 and 500 million in assets. And there's a lot of, thankfully, there's a lot of people out there these days that are like, yeah, that behavioral finance stuff or that, psychology of financial planning stuff's pretty cool. I've learned about it. I like it. It makes sense to me. I feel like I'm doing some of that now. I think about these things regularly when I go into meetings. Like, this is for you. We are really trying to work with firms like that are wanting to operationalize, systematize, create experiences that are informed by the research and things like that Ashley and I know about, but also the clinical work that both Ashley and I have also been a part of, like working with actual humans. So it's not just good ideas, it's ideas that have been put into practice and are well thought out. And so working with those firms that are wanting to implement and add and feel like they can say, my practice is experience driven, more than just I'm aware, of this financial psychology stuff.
Yeah. And you know, yes, those are the types of firms that we want and who it is ideal for. In terms of like, okay, so what does that look like in terms of a partnership, like working, together? Some of this comes out of, okay, a little story here, story time. So a few years ago, when I envisioned this role of what, fractional like behavioral officer support would look like, there were really these 3 kind of pillars, and that this role would support clients. They would support advisors and they would also support the firm. And, great idea. I have, spent the last 3 years like trying to figure out what the heck. Okay, but what does that like really look like? And a big heart's desire of mine is to be able to provide really what this offering, it just took me meeting you, Meg, really, like to be able to find the clarity. So that's what
Like to
it,
be needed.
yeah, it just took me meeting you to figure all this out. But in terms of what does it really look like? We'll be offering like quarterly trainings. Yeah,
I just want to say that those trainings are skill based.
yeah,
This is not good ideas. This is practice. You are going to come away with, whether it's learning to, use good reflections, or it's knowing, the different parts of the trans theoretical model of change, whether or not you could care about that word, I don't care. But like what, like how to really know where somebody is and what they do. There are so many great communication skill building, and we have really tried to focus all of the CE, not just like, hey, this is a cool idea, but this is a skill that you can practice and hone.
yeah. Yes, yes. The trainings will be quarterly trainings for firms that are focused on that. There will also be offering a client facing webinar under that kind of client support lens, is being able to bring a client facing webinar for your clients,
For your client.
which is awesome. And going back to
It's so
just the
awesome.
experience, like, aspect of it, it's really helping create a different kind of financial planning experience that you don't have to do. We do that.
Right. I think I mean, Ashley and I have both done those. Like different firms have asked us to like, hey, come and talk about, positive psychology, or hey, come and talk about legacy. And we've done that. And the cool thing that happens is, we've been talking now for 45 minutes about how you should, work to create experiences, and we're going to help you do that and the different ways to do that. Well, one really fun thing is to have me or Ashley come, we talk, then the client says, I didn't even think of it like that. And then they call you and then they say, hey, can we have a meeting about this? Or can we talk about it like this? And so you don't necessarily always have to be the one to be bringing it up. Having those couple of custom webinars, designed to be in front of the client will then come and ask you for those things, and you will be prepared to do it because of the tools and things like that that are going to be provided by Beyond the Plan. It's cool. It gets them used to us. It gets them used to the idea of financial psychology, which in and of itself, I mean, you don't have to do this, but if you ever wanted to refer to a financial therapist type person, the best thing to do is to have those clients meet a financial therapist so that they don't think it's weird or strange,
Mhm.
or maybe they will think it's weird or strange, but they'll self-select out, then
They will.
fine, it's going to be okay.
Most clients like my weirdness,
Most,
enough,
most
most
being the
of
key
it.
word.
I'll knock on wood here yet. But yeah, from an experience standpoint, offering just kind of client facing webinar experience, also, monthly case consultation
Yes.
with us. Come and ask us all of your challenging case questions, in a peer supported like environment. And let's just talk about the hard things, that the non-technical, difficult things that, you ask clients like, what keeps you up at night? Well, we are asking you, what keeps you up at night? What are the challenging client scenarios that, keep your wheels spinning? Let's talk through things like that. And there's some other things too. White label client newsletter, other tool access to other tools, activities that, Meg and I, will be putting out content wise, several other things. But we're excited about, this foundation offering. And I guess maybe I didn't mention this, but as an option within that is also access to a financial behavior specialist, like us. So having that, somebody that can meet with your clients, and just maybe have conversations that aren't on the technical stuff, but are as equally as valuable
Absolutely.
as well. So we are pumped, really pumped. If I could jump up and down, like, and not knock my microphone off and create a lot of difficulty from an editing standpoint, like I would do that right now. But we are really, really pumped about this upcoming year, in that place of excitement. Just to kind of wrap, some of this up, we wanted to share this with you. We wanted to be able to come on, talk about this, for you to hear it from us, hear our voices, talk about it and explain it, and invite you to consider checking it out. We'll be, putting out links for setting up, calls, consultation calls to just ask more about, is this the right fit for our firm? Or maybe that's something else. Maybe it's not. Maybe, we need something different. Do you have any ideas? Like there's at least, being able to sometimes just have that conversation, is helpful to learn
Beneficial
more.
for you.
Yeah, so we'll be putting, information like that out there. Meg, as we kind of wrap things up, what do we need to say about these 5 domains, about what this looks like in terms of how Beyond the Plan is approaching and offering it? What else do we need to say about this? What did we miss?
I honestly don't know that we missed anything. I'm feeling just pretty, like you said, pretty generally excited about, we, again, Ashley and I have both been independently and together working with many advisors over the years in different capacities. And that same idea of like, that's a good idea, but like, how do I really do that? All keeps coming up. And we are both super excited, about working with firms to do just that. One thing that we haven't mentioned is that we keep talking about tools,
Mm,
but something that we will be doing in 2026 is not, I can't even really say that it's tools for advisors. We are going straight, creating things directly for your clients. Like, and there's going to be different ways to get access to those, but there can be, for lack of a better word, I'm going to call it fun work. I'm not going to call it homework. But there can be, whether it's like the 5 dates that your client should go on to talk about money, or whether it's a values exercise, or whether it is, what's another one that we've thought about?
give all the secret sauce
Okay,
away,
well, that's fair.
but
We've
those are
thought
2 good
about,
ones.
a lot of tools that we could actually build that would be meant for just any person to do, and that certainly that information could be brought back to the financial advisor, or you could ask about it knowing, about the fact that they did it, but that we're really trying to help give them more structure so that they can come back to you, which I think will be really cool to make tools actually for the clients. And then what's left to the financial advisor is to facilitate and document and consider and conversate about what those comes out of the tool means to the plan and to ongoing planning.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we will definitely keep you posted. 2026, the rollout for that. But, the client facing aspect is something I am just as thrilled to be doing. Uh, I'm excited. And some of it is also in service of helping you advisors take some of the load off of you as well. There. So be looking out for that. Well, if you just follow Meg and I, you will know it will.
Where are all the places they should follow us then?
You will know. Yeah, that's a great question. So both of us hang out on LinkedIn. You can check out both of us there. You can check out the Beyond the Plan website, www.beyondthefp.com. You can sign up and subscribe to our newly revamped monthly newsletter that'll have information, new announcements, where you can find Meg and I. So I just had the song from Carmen Sandiego just popped into my head. Like,
Where
in the world are Meg and Ashley. Yeah. So we can wear hats. Yeah. I don't know if how we get the music to like
good call.
play behind that, but it would be cool if when they opened up the email and scrolled to that section that music started
Yes.
playing.
Okay, that for sure.
For sure. So, yeah, information like that, you can find us there. We have a YouTube channel.
Hmm.
The handle is at Beyond the Plan Solutions. You can check out that where Meg and I will be putting up video content, shorts, longs, mediums. Is that what you call it? I don't know. Shorts and
Mediums.
long mediums. Yeah, we'll just be posting videos in whatever form and or size there. I'm gonna let Meg tell you about her Substack, Less Lonely Money.
Well, you also have planning and beyond,
Well,
like the
yeah, this
podcast that we're on
podcast.
right now.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot we were recording this on the actual yeah. This podcast is great. You should follow it. You should subscribe. We are working hard at trying to get this out there to more advisors globally across the world. So any kind of like, any kind of share, any kind of rating, review, subscribing is super duper helpful. We appreciate all of that support. Meg, why don't you wrap us up with a little bit of LLM promos?
So, Less Lonely Money is my Substack, and it's an article every month that's free. So, anybody can go and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. There is and all I talk about is the intersection of money, relationships, feelings. And at this point, by the time you're listening to this, there'll be 12 or 13 articles available because it started in 2025. I also have a paid version that is definitely geared towards financial planners. So each article essentially has a sister article, and the sister article has within it what could be a client facing newsletter. So if you liked that topic, many of them are evergreen, and you're like, oh, that's a cool idea, I would like to send this out, you can. And with that, it then also has a, like, if the client called and said, hey, I read that newsletter and it got me thinking, it has an idea for like how to turn that into a meeting. So it's got questions to ask, different meeting flow that would allow you to kind of talk about or around, facilitate a discussion on that particular idea. So it's definitely an advisor facing tool that's got some great content, great discussion, and an optional newsletter if you want it. Or if you just really don't like reading my really, really long newsletters, because they do tend to be anywhere between 3,500 to 4,500 words, you can read the 1,000 word version in the paid. So
Yeah, I like to read it over coffee. There are a few coming up that I'm not going to say it, but I'm not gonna be able to read them over coffee. It might have to be an alcoholic beverage. And yeah, I'm pumped about it. I'm still pumped about it, but at least I know, like, I just need to change up when I'm reading it. It's fantastic, all of the writing and resources that Meg puts out. So make sure that you follow her there. As we are wrapping things up, I want to extend a big, huge thank you to all of you who are listening and who have been listening all along the way. Thank you so much for your support, not only in just, this podcast, but also the work that both Meg and I do. And in this collaboration, I think I speak for both Meg and I in saying that we truly, truly appreciate it. It is very, very meaningful there. And, this was a different episode. And so I know that we threw a lot of things out there. I think they're awesome. We think that they're awesome.
mhm.
We think that they're great. If there are questions that come up as a result of it, we'd love to just have a conversation with you. So we'll make sure that we put links in the show notes there as terms of how you can connect and contact with us. We'd love to stay connected with you. And look, I know that I typically wrap things up just by, sharing all the great resources. I know we've already done that, where you can find us. Meg, any last parting words before we jump off here? I think we've covered everything.
Let's have a kick ass 2026.
Okay. Yeah, I'm cool with that. Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah. And with that, my friends, thank you. Thank you again for allowing Meg and I into your mind and into your ears. As you go out into your week, be sure to remember that finances don't have feelings, but your clients do. Until next time, keep planning, keep growing, and keep going beyond.